First, let's define what it means by responsible messaging.
George, right now, all of us, or most of us indeed, are high on adrenaline. And there's a huge amount of cortisol floating around in the air because one reason or most of us are really anxious right now. We're wondering perhaps whether we're going to get the second round of funding that we've been promised. We're wondering when and if it's going to be safe to go back to the office. We're wondering whether it's going to be safe to go on public transportation. And so for everybody who's in the business of communicating right now, it's very important that our messaging is responsible. And I say that because more so than ever in this environment that we're all having to deal with, words really matter. So it's important that your messaging is accurate. And what do I mean by that? It's really important that we carry out research and that we listen to all our audiences so that we get our messaging right. Now, for example, for this conversation that you and I are having today, for Collision, Fleishman-Hillard's True Global Intelligence Department carried out research in the UK and in the United States, 1,000 people working from home right now. And they concluded, the interviewees concluded overwhelmingly that they would prefer that their companies spent money on making it easier for them to work from home rather than spending that money preparing the office for them to return until at least such time as a vaccine is found. It was a very, very clear message. So that's what I mean by responsible messaging. If you're armed with that type of data, then I think you can communicate more effectively and more responsibly.
Thank you. And let's say I'm a brand marketer and I'm ready to put out my message. How do I stand out from everyone else whose same message is going to be the same? Like, what do you do?
First of all, I think there needs to be an intersection or a collision between your brand and reputation. And if you're making extravagant claims about your organization, about your brand that has no real credibility, then it simply isn't going to fly at this time. Again, for me, it comes back to the insights, it comes back to the data that arrives from really good research and asking the right questions. And I think a number of organizations have got it really right. I mean, you're an advertising expert, but I loved the Budweiser commercial that came as a result of the cessation of the sports season. So Budweiser found that they were not spending their sports marketing dollars in the same way. So what they did was they teamed up with the American Red Cross, with whom they've had an association for over 100 years. And they used sports stadia with all the partners they've had as drive-in blood banks. And it was a wonderful service to the community. And at the same time, it was playing on their association and their heritage with sports. So I thought that was magnificent.
Thank you. And I'm going to read this one next question because I want to make sure I get it right. I was saving it for you, but the big messaging question on companies' minds at the moment is return to the workplace. How do you communicate that responsibly with employees around such an emotive question?
It is going to be, George, the question, not only for this interview, it's going to be the question throughout 2020. And again, and I've said it so many times already in this conversation, it's about knowing your workforce. There are many, many people who just can't wait to get back to the office. And there are many others who want to work from home. And it's really important that we do the work and find out what our particular workforce wishes to do. And assumptions can be made by employers. And I think it's really important that we don't do that. One of the issues I'm personally very concerned about right now is the level of mental health anxiety among workforces everywhere as a result of being at home for this length of time. A lot of people watching this interview today will have young children and been in a situation where one has got to work maybe harder than ever before, and at the exact same time also look after your children. That can cause all kinds of levels of anxiety. But I think it's really important for employers not to make decisions in a vacuum, but to make sure they really understand what their employees are telling them. And the good firms, the really smart firms, are devoting a great deal of resource to answering this key question right now.
You know, let's change gears here a little bit. I mean, do you ever see things ever returning back to normal?
I am absolutely certain that what we enjoyed, what frustrated us up until the start of 2020, it's over. We are not going back to normal. So on one level, not going back to normal means that many, many more people are going to work from home. They're going to be encouraged to work from home in a way that never happened before. I personally just love the way we're embracing technology that was there before, but most of us wouldn't use it. I mean, I find it hilarious, for example, that up until a couple of months ago, if you wanted to contact someone, you talk by phone. And if you decided to make contact with them and said, well, let's have a video call, people would just shudder at the thought. Now we've got used to been invited into people's homes, not only seeing them, but seeing their children and their cats and their dogs. So all of these changes that are there right now are going to be with us forever. There's lots and lots of changes. On another level, in terms of business as a whole, looking at it from the financial point of view, based upon conversations I am having with CEOs of our clients, some of the biggest companies in the world, I would say this: it is going to take until the early part of 2021 to begin to see some shoots of growth. It's going to take until the early part of 2022 to see a real return or the arrival at a new normal. And the more pessimistic of the CEOs of very, very large reputable corporations are saying it's going to take until 2023. So in the meantime, all of us are going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to become really resilient. For somebody at my stage of my career, I've been through a lot of ups and downs in my life. So I think people of my generation have developed a level of resilience. But for much younger people who have never been through something like this, they're going to have to develop new skills. And I've no doubt that they will do that in the months ahead.
You know, you touch on something there that's really interesting about developing these new skills and resiliency, but that also seems like it could have an impact on mental health. If you're this big CEO, and how do you measure the well-being of your employees during this pandemic? Because it seems like this is not something that they're just going to have to do short term. To your point, it could be until 2022, 2023.
Well, this is something we are looking at all the time. We are doing regular check-ins throughout our offices right around the world. I don't have a particular stat for our own firm, but Mark Benioff of Salesforce last month in May, in a conversation with Fortune on their CEO video, he was able to say that 36% of Salesforce's 50,000 staff are currently suffering some level of mental health issues as a consequence of this pandemic. And George, assuming that Salesforce, all their staff, very smart people, but reflect the workforce at large, this means 35, 36, certainly a third of the workforce are suffering mental health issues right now. So it is something that all of us who are watching this now, all of us who are in some level of authority, need to be incredibly mindful of the mental health state of all our employees.
Thank you for sharing that. That's all the time we have. This is Collision from Home. Thanks for watching.